Where will ERIK KARLSSON sign? Now, of course, he's still a member of the San Jose Sharks, but that could all change pretty soon as he becomes a UFA. Now, I'm going to be going through Capfriendly team by team here, and we're going to talk about a few different categories. A, is the team a contender? And is there a fit for him in the defense that they already have? B, do they have the cap space? Can they fit him financially? And C, geographically, is it a destination he might want to go to? I mean, I can't really answer that. I can speculate at best. I mean, there's a rumor that his wife wants to go back to a team near Ottawa. That's why they spoke of Montreal being a possibility as well. But I don't really see necessarily, I don't see at least one of those teams being definitely not a fit. And the other one, it's not likely either. So let's start with the Colorado Avalanche. Now, they've got just over $37 million in cap space. So it's there. I know they have some UFAs to sign, Rantanen being the biggest one, but there's still lots of space. Are they contenders? They look pretty good against Calgary, and they've got a lot of young players stepping up right now. I think this team could be great next year. There's a real possibility, and anyone looking at it would probably think the same. Now, who's on the right side on defense? There's Erik Johnson, there's Tyson Barrie, and there's Cale Makar. Now, Cale Makar can easily play second pairing the way he did in last year's playoffs. He looked fantastic. I see Tyson Barrie maybe as the odd man out. Maybe they trade him for some offensive depth. He's got a $5.5 million cap hit, and he's only signed for one more year. So I think geographically speaking, though, it's a little far. But they fit the A and B category quite well. So I'd say that's a definite possible. Next up, let's talk about the New Jersey Devils, who have just over $35.5 million cap space. This isn't happening. Even with Jack Hughes, the team just is not deep enough. They have the cap space, though. They're not contenders for at least a few years. Let's be realistic here. Although they could very well make the playoffs, and they're an up-and-coming team. Next, let's talk about the Ottawa Senators. Or let's not. He's not going back there. I mean, they have just over $35 million in cap space. Everyone knows Melnyk is financially in question at the moment. I mean, he dumped most of his veterans who were making lots of money, or that he would have had to pay. Yeah, it's his wife's hometown, but I'm not even gonna go into there. He would make a fit on that lineup. He played right along Shabbat, who I want to say, who plays on the left side. What a great number one pairing that would be, although they play very similar. So, anyways, next team up, let's talk about the Philadelphia Flyers, who have just over $33 million in cap space. So the cap space is there, and although they didn't make the playoffs, they had a strong second half, and all of a sudden they have a really good goaltender now in Carter Hart. And they've got a new coach in Vigneault, who's proven to be successful, especially with veterans. Is he a fit defensively? Now on the right side, they got Andrew McDonald, Radko Gudas, and Travis Sanheim. Yeah, so they trade one of those guys, maybe McDonald or Gudas, who either of those guys only have one more year left on their contract for a bit more defensive depth. Geographically, it's a short plane ride, and with some of their aging veterans like Giroux, Voracek, Van Riemsdyk, I see this as a possibility. Philly's one of those teams who could surprise everyone next season, and with Karlsson, I think it could push them into contender status with the right coach and some decent goaltending. Next up, the Columbus Blue Jackets, who have just over $32 million in cap space. I see this as only as a slim possibility. Now, the cap space is there, but they've lost arguably the best offensive weapon in Panarin, their best goaltender in Bobrovsky, and they could be losing Duchesne as well to free agency. If I'm Erik Karlsson and I'm even considering Columbus, I'd wait to see who they pick up in free agency first before I make that decision. And that might influence it because they looked really good in the playoffs. The problem is he a fit there? Because Seth Jones is their number one right defenseman. Then there's David Savard, and then there's Nudi Vara, and there's McQuaid. He's a UFA, but they seem like they would need more help on the left side than they would the right. So I'm sure, like San Jose, they would make a fit if they needed to be, but there's a slim chance. The Vancouver Canucks, with just over $30.5 million in cap space, so the space is there. I mean, they have the notables. They have to resign are Brock Besser, Alex Edler, who doesn't want to really sign without a no trade, and I'm not sure that's going to happen. They're not contenders, not for at least 3 years, really. On the right side, they've got Tanev, Stetcher, Biega, and Shen. So a fit could be made for him there. Vancouver's goaltending. Markstrom had a good year last year. The few years before that, he's kind of been up and down. Thatcher Demenko has a lot of promise, but who knows? And I think geographically speaking, this is a little too far. So next team that we'll talk about here will be the Carolina Hurricanes. They have the cap space with just under $29 million, but they're already set on right side defense with Hamilton and Falk and Brett Pesce. There's no room for him there. They need offense more than anything else, and they need to think about who they're going to sign in goaltending because both McElhinney and Marzik are UFAs. Next team we need to talk about, and would you consider them contenders? Not unless they get more help on offense. And they sign, and their goaltenders are, which are they going to be as good as that next year? I don't know. The New York Islanders at just under $28 million in cap space, so it's there. I know they have to resign Anders Lee, for instance. Jordan Eberle may or may not resign. And Valerie Filippa, they might be able to sign for cheap. On their right side D, they've got Boychuk, Pollock, and Mayfield, and Seidenberg, who's 37, who's UFA. So there's definitely a fit there. You could easily play on that first pairing. Yeah, Islanders need more offensive depth more than they need goal scoring. But hey, he could help that. And with Trotz, how he's turned that team around. They seem to have the goaltending pair. I know, who knows, maybe that was a bit of a one-off, but if they could come close to performing as well as they did last year, I think this is a definitive possibility. Geographic-wise, this isn't a far plane ride for them either. Next up, the Winnipeg Jets at just over $25 million in cap space. Yes, they're a contender. Yes, they kind of look like they have the cap space, but they have guys like of course, Line and Connor, who they've got to re-sign. They're both RFAs. That doesn't leave them much space. And of course, there's their right side. It has Byfuglien, Trouba, and Tyler Myers. Now, Trouba's an RFA. Myers is a UFA. They could trade Jacob Trouba for some. They don't even have to bring any money back. They can trade him for some high draft picks or prospects. Tyler Myers, they could just let him walk. Really, because they're not going to pay that guy, money, over $2 million to be a third line pairing right side defenseman, right? And if they can get a bridge deal out of Patrick Laine, it's possible. It's possible. Geographic wise, I know Winnipeg is not the biggest UFA market draw, but it's close enough to Ottawa. It's not too far of a plane ride. I want to say less than 4 hours. So I think this is a definitive possibility. Because of the way they have to dance around the cap, it would be hard, but they're contenders. Next up, we've got the San Jose Sharks. Now, the fit wasn't perfect because, Brent Burns is the right side, but they made it work, and they had a decent run in the playoffs. They just ran into, some injuries. And the problem is, although they have just under $25 million in cap space, They have a lot of players they got to re-sign to build up that offense on forwards. We got Donskoy, we have Pavelski, we have Thornton, we have Nyquist, we have Timo Meier. That's a lot of guys to sign with only just under $25 million in cap space. And when Karlsson is looking for a minimum, probably $9 million, I don't know. I mean, never put anything past Wilson. I'd say it's a bit unlikely, but it's definitely a possibility. The Florida Panthers. This is funny for one particular reason, really. Now, they have just under $22 million in cap space. It looks like they're going to be spending that on Panarin and on Bobrovsky. So for that reason alone, I don't see it happening. The other big one is because Mike Hoffman is still playing for the team, and that's one of the big reasons Karlsson was traded in the first place. Not just because Eugene Melnyk just had no money and didn't want to pay him, but of course, the whole drama between their wives and everything. Even if they traded Mike Hoffman, still the team knows Mike Hoffman now, and Karlsson, that dynamic, yeah. And on right D, they've got Ekblad, Matheson, and Pisk. Their right sides seems. Oh, no, Matheson is a left side. Anyways, they've got Pisk and Ekblad on the right side. They would have to trade one of those guys, really. Maybe Pisk, who's 27 and just making over. He has one more year before he becomes a UFA. I don't know. Highly unlikely, but possible. Next up, let's talk about the Minnesota Wild. They're not contenders. I don't see why we should go into this too much. Plus, on the right side, they've got Dumba and Spurgeon. They'd probably have to trade one of those guys, most likely Spurgeon, and they need much more help on their offensive side of things. And yeah, next, let's talk about the Buffalo Sabres, who have just over $20 million in cap space. And this is after signing Jeff Skinner. I know there's some rumors about, the fit he might make there. Geographically, it's not too far. Right now, on right side D, they've got Ristolainen, Bosnian, and Montour. I don't see Ristolainen or Montour playing bottom pairing right D. They probably would be trading one of those guys. I'd probably say Ristolainen, and he has like 3 more years left on his contract at just over 5.4. Their goaltending is too big of a question mark. I don't see them as contenders, at least for another couple of years. Yeah, they had a great first half of the season, and their new coach, he's too much of a wild card. If I'm Karlsson, I'm saying, I don't know what this team is. Maybe I'd wait to see who else they picked up. Especially offensively speaking, it's a possibility. I don't see this as being a likely scenario, though, even though it's geographically it's really close. Next, let's talk about the Chicago Blackhawks, who have just over $20 million in cap space. Now, Chicago didn't make the playoffs. Their first half of the season was really poor, but they really poured it on in their second half. They could fit him under the cap. I mean, their UFAs are Chris Kunitz, on their forward of note, and they have an RFA on D in Gustav Forsling. So there's some cap space room there for him. Now, who are the right D already there? Brent Seabrook and Connor Murphy. There's space for him on that blue line. And now Chicago has two really good lines. I'm not sure I'd put them. The only reason I wouldn't put them in contender status really is which team is going to show up next year. That's the thing. Is the first half or the second half team going to show up? And their goaltending. Corey Crawford, concussion problems. Colin Delia was kind of up and down. He could be really good, but that's a question mark there too. Highly unlikely, but possible. Next, let's talk about the New York Rangers, who have just over $19 million in cap space. Yeah, no, he's not doing there. If he wants to win a cup anytime soon, this team is in rebuild. They're not going to be contenders for 3, maybe 4 years, even with Kakko on this team. So I'm not even going to get into that. Would he make a fit on the right side? I know Shattenkirk plays right side along with Adam Fox, who they want to see what they have. He could be a gem of a prospect. And D'Angelo, yeah, I'm not going to spend any more time on that, really. Next, let's talk about the St. Louis Blues, who have just under $19 million in cap space. The notable UFAs on the forward side is Patrick Maroon. The RFAs, you're talking about Barbashev, Fabry, Sundqvist, and Blais. Blais, Sungfist, and Barbashev are important pieces. They're young, that they probably want to sign. And St. Louis could use some more offense. Their D, though, on the right side is pretty solid. I mean, Pietrangelo's only signed for more year, mind you, but he's the right side. Perienko's the right side. Bortuzzo's the right side. Schmaltz is the right side. I don't see the space for him here now. Anyways, the timing just doesn't seem to be right, and they need more offensive weapons. I think they would spend their money there instead, unless there were some trades made. Yeah, they're a contender. Geographically wise, it's not great, and the fit, I don't see it. I don't see it there. Let's talk about the Calgary Flames, who have just under $14.5 million in cap space, and they have to sign Tkachuk, who's an RFA. That's going to eat away at a lot of that. On their right side D, they've got Brody, they've got Hamonic, they've got Stone, and Anderson, and a couple of other players here, Fattenberg, Prout. Yeah, I could see Calgary as a contender if Karlsson joined the team, but would he join them with a big question mark in the goaltending? I'm not sure. They seem to have the forwards there. I know they're thinking about trading Jeff Neal, seeing if they can get rid of his contract there somewhere. Geographically wise, it isn't that. It's probably about around a 4-hour trip, so it's not too bad, but I'm not sure if I'm ERIK KARLSSON if I do anything until I see Calgary fix that goaltending. Let's talk about the Boston Bruins with just over $14 million. That's not happening. They don't need them. They look how well they're doing right now. And after this year, they may start turning into more of a rebuilding team. They've rebuilt on the go really well so far. Their right D, you're looking at Miller and Clifton and Kampfer and McAvoy. Can you see and Brandon Carlo? Can you see either of those guys playing second, or McAvoy being bumped down to second pairing? Maybe. They're UFAs though. Heinen is an RFA. Cherry, is not going to cost much. Johansson, I'm not sure they'll keep him at 28, although he played well in the playoffs. Possible, but not likely. Geographically wise, it's not too far, obviously. Can you see him playing alongside Chara? Wouldn't that be interesting? I'd like to see that, not as a Leaf fan, mind you, but that would be take a good defense into a devastatingly good defense already. 14 million? It's possible. Charlie McAvoy's an RFA, though. So he's going to eat up into that cap space, and Torrey Krug will after next season. So cap-wise, not so much. Next up, let's talk about the Detroit Red Wings. I'm not even going to dive into this because they have just over $13.5 million in cap space, and they're looking at least 4 years, maybe more, of being a contender. With all due respect to Detroit fans. Next, let's talk about the Dallas Stars, who have just over $12 million in cap space. Not too much space there. They really need more forward depth than anything else. Their right D consists of John Klingberg, Polak, Julius Honka, Lovejoy, who's a UFA, Mark Mathot's lefty. They could find a fit for him there. I could see him playing alongside Lindell and Klingberg and Heiskanen. Wow, they would immediately have the best defense in the league right there, bar none. But with their cap space, I think there's... I'm not sure if it's going to work. Spezza's not coming back. We probably know that. Zuccarello, they might not re-sign because they'd have to give away a first-round draft pick. I wouldn't re-sign him, but they still need forward depth. Possible, unlikely, geographically wise, it's too far. Next, are they contenders? Definitely. With him, definitely. Next, let's talk about the LA Kings. I'm not even going to get into this. This video is too long already. It's just they have just over $11 million of cap space. This team is rebuilding. It doesn't matter who they put on this team. They need more than just one superstar. The Montreal Canadiens, there's been rumors about that happening. They have just under $12 million of cap space. They could probably trade some guys, make some room somehow. Weber's on right D. Petrie's on right D. I think they need more lefty than they do a righty. So he'd probably have to take a cut in salary. And Montreal needs more, I would think, more forward depth than anything else. They're probably looking more for a forward superstar than they would a defensive one. And are they contenders? No. They're even with Karlsson, hum and haw over that one. Next, let's talk about the Washington Capitals. Yeah, okay, they have just over $10 million in cap space. Do they have any notables to re-sign? Smith Pelly, Brett Connolly at 27, Hagelin, maybe. They'd have to move a lot of pieces here. I think Washington, geographically, yeah, it's not too far, but I think they're looking more for depth pieces on D than they are a superstar. Next up, the Edmonton Oilers with just under $10 million in cap space. They're nowhere near being contenders. Even with Erik Karlsson on D, they really need they need wingers and they need goaltending. So I'm not going to dive into that. The Anaheim Ducks, they're a rebuilding team. They have just over $9 million in cap space. Yeah, no. The Toronto Maple Leafs, they could really use Erik Karlsson. The cap space is a huge problem, though, at just over $9 million. Now, if they manage to trade Marlowe's contract and save some money there, move out Zaitsev, he would look good alongside Morgan Rielly, who's a good two-way defenseman, by the way. So that would be not the perfect fit, but it would definitely be a fit. And of course, Marner, they got to re-sign. There's a lot of moving parts. It's kind of like Winnipeg here. Highly unlikely, but possible. And yes, they would be a contender. And geographic-wise, it's very close. I know Ottawa is him used to playing with them and them being rivals. That's a bit of a thing there, but it could happen. Unlikely, but it could happen, and there's a fit. The Arizona Coyotes have even less cap space at just over $8.5 million. Although they did well and just missed the playoffs, that's too far geographic-wise. I don't see them as contenders, even with Karlsson. With all due respect, especially to Tocchet there, they need more scoring for the forward part. Tampa Bay Lightning, just over $8.5 million. This is like Winnipeg and Toronto. You know he's good friends with Hedman, and you know they want him, but how are they going to re-sign Point? On the right side, they got Girardi and Stralman, who are UFAs this season. And yeah, I'd instantly drop those guys for Erik Karlsson. The other right D defense, they have Cernak and Ruda. They have enough power on the left to, lose Girardi and Stralman and sign Karlsson and maybe trade some other guys. But Braden Point, I don't know if they're going to keep him if they were to get Karlsson. Next, the Nashville Predators, just over $7 million. Yeah, if they could trade PK Subban, they need forward depth. I see them going after like a player like Duchesne hard. And still having to get rid of some money because Yossi they're going to have to sign after next season, is it? So I just don't see that as that being a fit right now. Then we have the Pittsburgh Penguins, who are basically in cap hell with just over $3 million. Yeah, they could use a lot of players to get back there. No one's counting them out, and geographically they're close. But they have Letang on right D and Schultz on right D already. One might argue they're much more weaker on the left side, and the cap space just isn't there. They would have to move mountains. And of course, the Vegas Golden Knights, last but not least, they don't have any cap space whatsoever. Would Karlsson, is this a contender? Definitely. Geographically, it's not the greatest. It's a little bit too far. Contender-wise, they'd be great, but the money's just not there. There you have it. Please let me know where maybe your top 5 places that you realistically think Karlsson might be going to. I'd love to hear what you have to say about that in the comment section down below. Hit like if you like this video. Smash that subscribe button if you haven't already. And hey, if you happen to have any Hockey Geek friends, please don't feel shy about sharing. Thanks again, and I'll see you soon.